Good morning, Henning. How are you today?
I am doing very well. Thank you, Jason. How
Yeah,
about
this is great.
yourself?
I'm doing terrific. As we were just talking about, the sun is shining here in New York today, so it's a good day. And what about the weather near you? How's it out there today?
California is sunny as always,
That's
or
terrific.
most of the time, I should say.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I know that we have a lot to talk about today, and I thought that it'd be best for the listeners that are kind of coming here to just share a little bit about each of us so they get a flavor for kind of what we're going to be talking about and who we are. So, would you like to kind of kick that off?
Yeah, absolutely. I spent the last 25 years in sales, leading sales teams in different companies, different products, different team sizes, different geographies. And I took that experience and started a business where I'm now a matchmaker for fractional and interim executives. And in a sense, I help business owners, CEOs, founders of startup companies to build sales into a repeatable process by bringing the right person into their organization. And I have grown passionate and opinionated about what constitutes great sales, great salesmanship, great sales leadership. And I put that forward in my efforts today.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I'm really excited to have this conversation. And so I'm Jason Kramer. I'm the founder of Cultivize. I come with 25 years of marketing experience, but Cultivize does not provide any inbound marketing, web development services. Really, our niche focus is to be able to help companies take all the leads that they're generating through their marketing efforts, bring them through the sales funnel in a very succinct way, and at the same time, giving the sales team a process to follow so that we could actually nurture leads through the buyer's journey. And really, the end game of this is not only increase productivity for the sales team, it also helps with the marketing ROI and overall business operations. So any business that doesn't have these systems in play obviously is challenged more to get things going. And I excited to kind of be able to share some tips and resources today as we kind of dive into this together. So let me ask you the first question, if I can, Henning. So
Yeah.
what impact does the success of a sales team have? And what are some things that the listeners today can find out that if they're looking to either grow or hire a new sales team, like where do they start off, with that, what seems like a mountful task, to get that done?
It is a mountain to climb.
Yeah.
It's not an easy thing. I would, there are different companies are in different stages of their development. Founders, owners, CEOs come at it with different skill sets and different past experiences. And so those are the foundational elements that are there. And as a any founder who starts a business, you initially start wearing all the different hats for all the different functions in your company. And then you start taking these hats off. And ideally, you shed responsibilities and transfer them to somebody else in areas that you are least familiar with. And
Hmm.
so if you're a tech founder with an engineering background, then sales isn't something that comes naturally. As a founder, you should be selling your product first. But when it comes to then building a sales team, I would always recommend to bring in somebody that has done that before, because that's very different from selling yourself as a founder.
Well, it's like I remember when I started my first company, I was working with a business coach at the time, and he had a great term, which was the skillpreneur, right? So somebody that's got a great skill, they think they're an entrepreneur and they can do wear all the hats as you describe, and they could only go so far, right? But then to your point, you have to bring in the right talent for the team that's going to fit that role. So I guess it ultimately starts with the interview, right? So like, what would be some good tips and things to look for that you would be hiring a productive salesperson during the interview process?
Yeah, I think it all starts with hiring. On the reverse end of hiring, the firing part of the letting go part of individuals, I've encountered a lot of business owners who have said, I've hired and a few months later fired the
Hmm.
salesperson again because they were not performing. And it all goes back to the hiring, because that's where the CEOs, the owner's responsibility comes in hiring the right people. And if you don't know what to look for, it's really tough. And the initial instinct, and I did this myself, was to look for domain expertise. So somebody who has worked in this industry before, who has sold that same product before, maybe from a competitor. That's always the first instinct. And that's not always the best thing to do, because performance in sales is always relative to the company, the product, the market, the economy. And so somebody that was really good in one role doesn't necessarily have to be good in another. And so there are generic traits, and there are obviously a lot of traits, but what I would look for, at the very top are three things: a good listener. So listening over talking. Don't hire a talker, hire a listener. Somebody that is structured, because sales is a process. It's not something you do haphazardly, shooting from the hip. And the third one would be somebody that has an interesting, relatable personality. And all three of these things you can identify in a conversation, in an interview with a candidate.
And with the way today and everybody using Zoom, I imagine it's much easier doing that if you're not able to be in front of the person, to be over Zoom versus doing a phone interview. You can't look at those mannerisms and the expressions of their body language, right? So I would imagine it's much more difficult to do a phone interview, which certainly plenty of businesses do, perhaps even as a first stage or another stage. So I'd imagine with the technology today, it makes things easier.
I totally agree. I think voice carries maybe 20% of somebody's personality, while Zoom doesn't show the entire body language, and it doesn't show people in interaction. I think it gets us 70 or 80% of the way there. And then you always have to keep in mind, what is the sales scenario for the individual? If selling happens on the phone, you want to interview over the phone to get those skills. If selling happens through Zoom or another video conferencing system, you want to use that tool, because what the impression the person gives you as the interviewer is exactly the position that the client is in a few weeks or a few months later.
Right. Makes total sense. So I'd imagine that there's also, like, once they do, a company does find the right fit for the organization, there's always going to be struggles, right? Even whether it be sales or any role that you're hiring for. And I would also imagine there's got to be motivation too, right? So kind of thinking about, how do you plan for, like, what are the struggles that a salesperson might have, and what's the solution for that? And then, how do you keep them motivated, right, to be performing, to meet their goals, and giving them the resources they need to make that happen?
That's a big topic.
It's a big topic we don't have a lot of time to dive all into, but maybe there's a quick tidbit, we can talk about, because I think that's important, right?
But since you and I are joined at the hip, you focus on marketing, I focus on sales, we'll play this back and forth. So I'll give you my top three motivators, and then I'll turn it around, and I would love to hear from you.
Absolutely.
What you think are the top three motivators for somebody in a marketing role. So, I mean, the obvious thing for sales is money. Sales reps are motivated financially, but money can take different forms. It can take trips, it can take gifts, little perks. Those are all relevant. The second one is recognition, the public recognition in particular, when people are called out in front of the company or in front of their team as a performer. And the third one is, if you can create a mission for your company or for your product, and it shouldn't be superficial or blatantly made up, but if you have a product or a service that solves a real problem at the customer, and you have customers who give you testimonials around this, then you can rally a team around that mission, and that is a strong motivator. So how about in marketing?
Well, absolutely. I mean, so I think the biggest struggle, in terms of just marketing as a high level is what's working, right? For marketing. So not knowing, yeah, the marketing is generating leads, they're being given to the sales team, but what is the sales team doing with those leads, and does that information get back to marketing? So I think the biggest challenge, between your world and my world is that the dots don't connect often in companies, mainly because they don't have the processes and technology in play to connect those dots. And so at the end of the day, someone's going to get blamed if things aren't working, right? So it's either the marketing team isn't doing their jobs, they're not bringing in good leads, or the sales team isn't closing the leads because they're saying that the leads are bad, right? And so it goes back and forth, I think in most businesses. And so, yeah, I mean, it's something that is fixable, but it's not fixable just with technology. It's fixable with process and a rhythm between the two and coming up with the unique solution for each unique business.
Yeah. Now, in sales, we were traditionally more remote and working from home than any other function in the business. And certainly with COVID in the last 2.5 years, we've been put in a situation, or many companies were put in a situation that even if they didn't support it before, they were forced into this experiment. Where do you think are marketing people more productive and more effective, at home when they work remote or in the office?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. So the reality is, I've been working virtually for like 20 years, right? So for me, it comes natural. I think the challenge is that when you work in a collaborative environment, such as marketing, and people are sitting around a conference room table and they're kind of spitballing ideas, and or there's clients coming in and they're, and again, using the facial, face to face as far as body language. Are people happy with the concept that we just talked about or the pitch idea versus just doing it over phone or email? So I think that definitely for sure, there's been a shift towards the acceptance of working virtually. There's even been a lot of technology beyond Zoom that's made that possible. But at the end of the day, I think that it all comes down to leadership. And if you have strong leadership, you can be creative in any work environment, right? It doesn't have to be that you're all sitting around, because the reality is, even the agencies we know that we work with, even though the people that might be in the office, some people are still siloed, right? Like, oh, we can't be around the conference room table, right? Or we're all sitting in our separate offices, or we have floating schedules and not everybody's in on the same day. So I don't know that, at some point it will get back to where it was, but I don't personally think there's a big difference, from the experience I've seen.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
brought up leadership. I think that's a really important topic. And it's even more important when people are not in the same space physically, but are remote. And it's, to me, always this difference between managing and leading.
Yeah.
A lot of people manage. They have in a linear hierarchy people that report to them. Their livelihood, their performance reviews, their work assignments are all in the hand of the manager that leads that particular group. But that is a far cry from what real leadership means, when you as a leader are not relying on line responsibility and on the fact that you can slap somebody's hand just because they are hierarchically inferior to you, but because people want to follow you. And you can create that, and that leadership is something that creates true job satisfaction. When we talk about productivity, when we talk about overcoming difficulties in a role, how do I improve myself? Leadership plays a really big part in that, because if you have a manager, somebody that gets in your face every day, somebody that is wasting your time by continually asking unnecessary questions, then you're losing, as a sales rep, a lot of your productivity. Whereas on the other hand, it's not just not having that is not just bringing you back to neutral. A real leader can actually bring you forward and can improve productivity just by being being trusted, by being followed, by being able to communicate well with the team, and create a sense of cohesiveness, a sense of mission, a sense of joint accomplishment as a leader of a team.
Absolutely. And it also comes to accountability, I think is an important factor in that as well, right? So, you know, the leadership is a key critical component, right, to having a successful team, whether it's the running the sales team, a marketing team, any team in an organization. But at the end of the day, you also have to make sure that the team is doing what they should be doing, right? So it's leading by example. And that's what we often look for, you know, when we talk to companies, is there a strong leadership? But is there also leadership that's going to see, okay, well, there is a new vision, or we do want to take this initiative. We're going to take accountability, not only for ourselves as the leader, but also for the team to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing as well. And I like what you said, you know, no one wants to be kind of, you know, overwatched and sort of babied or smothered. You know, they want to do their job. That's what they're being hired to do. And so if you're there kind of, you know, asking them a million questions, the reason you're probably asking those questions is because you don't have a system in place to get the answers yourself, right? Or you don't want to do the work yourself to get the answers. And so, you know, that's, I know what we're going to kind of get into in a few minutes here, but, you know, having a CRM and a sales tool and a platform where the sales managers can get all the insights they need is just going to make things more effective, not only for the sales team, but it's going to be able to bring, you know, insights, you know, which is going to be really important as well. And just a quick example of that is a salesperson, right, coming into a weekly meeting or a monthly meeting with their sales manager says, okay, so what's going on? What do we have in the pipeline, or what problems do we have, or whatever, any of the number of questions that would come up. That's a very blanketed question. But if you can come in and you can have that information ahead of time and say, we need to talk about Jason's deal. What's going on with that? I see it's been open for 3 months now. Where are we at? Or this deal or that deal. You're having a more effective conversation, and you're honing in on areas where that salesperson needs your help versus just saying, hey, what's going on? You know, acting as if you don't know what's going on, right?
Yeah.
And that's, I think, a huge differentiator, you know, in those two scenarios.
Well, sales and performance in sales can really be boiled down to three things. It's people, it's process, and it's technology. Those three things need to be the right ones for the right kind of product, the right kind of market. And technology, I mean, I'm old enough to remember that in sales, the only technology was a CRM system. And I think it's still the core of how a lot of sales teams need to operate. But of course, there are plenty of tools now available to supplement, to aid, to take front end and back end processes, and of course, integrate marketing and sales so that it becomes a cohesive process also from a technology point of view. And to your point of leading by example, a sales manager or a sales leader that doesn't use the CRM system that the company has put in place is defeating the whole purpose. So the conversation about reviewing a deal or reviewing somebody's week shouldn't start by tell me everything you did or tell me everything that happened with this account so far, because that's all in the CRM, and the sales manager, sales leader should have looked in the system and should have seen what has happened to this point. Mm-hmm. The conversation should really be about what do we need to do going forward to bring this deal to closure, to win this customer, to achieve whatever goal you set out to achieve. And so that's what conversations between sales leaders and sales reps should focus on.
Couldn't agree more.
So how do you think that a sales team can impact a marketing team? We talk a lot about how marketing impacts sales, but I think it also works in the reverse. So what can sales teams do to help their marketing counterparts?
Well, I think that, you know, it's having a system to report back to the marketing team, say, yeah, this lead was good or this lead wasn't good, and here's why. That's for sure one thing. Another example would be getting information about what that prospect is interested in. So, you know, if you have the service, the widgets, whatever you're selling, being able to segment that data in the CRM so that the marketing team, instead of just blasting out content to everybody and it's the same content to the whole list, now you can send out content individually based on what that particular prospect or it's a repeat customer is interested in. So being able to share data is extremely important. And I think the biggest thing that, not biggest, but one of the concerns that sales teams often have is, well, that's going to be a lot of work for me to use a CRM. I got to enter all this data in there, like that's time consuming. And the reality is that if you have a CRM that's set up in such a way where you're just clicking a button and you're making very small little movements in the CRM, there's workflows and automation behind all that to make everything happen and to have that exchange pass through to back to marketing. And so that's our kind of goal, is to not create more work. If anything, we're trying to save time for the salespeople, because at the end of the day, they want to sell, right? That's what they're being hired to do. They're not being hired to do data entry, right? So a super, quick analogy is, someone coming to a website, filling out a form, that data going to an email address to somebody's inbox. Then somebody has to manually put all that information into a system or a spreadsheet and then start recording notes on that. Well, doesn't it make a lot more sense to have all that data feed into the CRM automatically and a thank you message be sent out automatically that, hey, someone will reach out to you, and to be able to orchestrate all of that behind the scenes without anybody lifting a finger is completely more efficient than the old school way of doing everything manually. And that's really what we strive for, is to create those efficiencies, for our clients.
Yeah, and it's the headline here is systemization, right? You want to create a repeatable process that is augmented by technology, so that you have a system that a person can step into and be their very best and produce the best possible results. And CRM systems specifically, but really the entire tech stack of a company should always reflect that process that you want to achieve. So if note taking is a tedious task and something that's in addition to all the other things a marketing or a salesperson does, then that defeats the purpose. But if you design it in a way that it reflects what they would naturally do, then, or would have done in any kind of process, then it's not additional work. So if I'm a sales rep and I make a call, I do take notes somewhere, somehow. If the notes can be a call recording that's transcribed, that is summarized automatically, then that is a fantastic tool to increase productivity. If my work as a salesperson has led me to maintain a whiteboard or an Excel spreadsheet with high-level notes so that I always know what to focus on, that can go straight into a CRM system if it's designed well. And you can get your prioritization list, your whiteboard, straight out of the CRM, with the added benefit that it's not just there for you as a salesperson, but for everybody else in the organization to see. Because that's when we talk about all the traps that salespeople fall into. If it's in your notebook on your whiteboard, you're the only person who sees it. And every time you have to explain, because people don't know.
And what if you're out sick or you're on vacation and someone needs to jump into that deal, then it's just going to fall on the wayside. So, the other thing also, just to kind of piggyback on that, is, having a process. We talk a lot about process, right, and productivity. A lot of salespeople would also kind of come into the office every day and be like, okay, well, who am I going to call? They may have this short list of people, but then after that, it's like, okay, let me just go through whoever I've not spoken to in a while, right? And it's all these like random kind of things, like you say, shoot from the hip processes, which at the end of the day, randomly sometimes will pay out, but it's not systematic where it's, that you're going to get some results. And so, having a system, that has a combination of tracking behavior and not just recording data entry, but when people visit a website, when they're opening up emails from the marketing, team that are being sent out, when they're checking out things on social media, having all these things connected and create what we call lead scores allows the sales team to say, okay, well, here in the database of 10,000 people, here's the 2% that are ranking really high, that are a hot lead, not because they're calling us or filling out a web form, but they're engaging in our content. And they're engaging in our content for a reason, right? They're absorbing that because they're likely in that buying mode where they're doing research, they're ready to make a final decision. And so if we can pass all that information to the sales team, guess what? Now that sales team is going to be making phone calls on people that are more likely to say yes or move through the sales process versus somebody that you haven't spoken to in a year that has never opened up any of your emails or been to your website in a year, right? Yeah. So it's quite obvious where you would get a better result. And that's the power of what we can do, when we help clients. Yeah.
And you can extend that scoring beyond just quote unquote just scoring of leads. You can, if it's a client and a decision maker at a client, as the person enters, moves from marketing into sales, what stage is the deal in? What was the agreed upon next step? What was the tone of the last conversation that was recorded? What further engagement, even now during the sales process, does this person have with our content? How quickly does he open an email that I sent? How did he read an article that I sent him as a sales rep? So all of these things can be scored, and it should never be a question, who do I call next or who do I call first? It should always be a ranked score, and there should always be a list of who to call next, so that there's never a question of or any randomness as to who you pick up the phone and call next. So I asked you what sales can do for marketing.
Yeah.
I would like to share with you what I think marketing can do specifically for sales. We already talked about the whole aspect of leads, that are being fed into the sales team. I think there is, and I hope you agree, but I look for your opinion. There's more marketing can do. I think brand is one of the big things, because brand is a door opener. I've sold for a well-known 125-year-old brand, and I've sold for an unknown startup. And it's a whole lot easier to get somebody on the phone, into a call, into a meeting room, if you have a brand that people associate something with. So that's one important piece. And then there is the whole notion of messaging. How do you message? How do you position the product, the solution that you're offering as a company? And I've always felt there has to be strong collaboration and continuous collaboration between marketing and sales to develop that messaging. It's not something that marketing should do sort of in an office, in an ivory tower, and just pass down to sales and say repeat. Because sales is the one that tests that messaging every day with clients. And so that feedback needs to go back, needs to lead marketing to revise it. And at any given time, between the tools and the transactional pieces that marketing uses, like a website or an email or collateral, and what sales says and writes in emails, it should always be the exact same messaging, because that's how you win clients. And then we don't have to debate how much of the sales process happens before the salesperson gets involved and afterwards, if the messaging is aligned.
Yeah, and that's a valid thing. And the one note to add to that is that there are plenty of salespeople that are really, really poor at writing emails, right? So if you can have a system that, and it's not to their fault, right? It's just not their skill set, but they have to do it. They have to do a follow-up email. They have to, whatever they have to send. And so if you have a CRM system where you can put in templates and they can be modified, then the whole entire team is speaking with the same voice, the same brand, the same persona representing the company, and you can take from the best operating salespeople that are performing the best and say, okay, well, what works for you when you send out emails? What kind of language are you using? Are they short emails? Are they long emails? Are they more bullet point format? And then just take all that feedback and then share it, through a templated format with the rest of the team. And now the whole team is benefiting.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to describe this. If you think of productivity in sales, if you how would you define that? What does that mean to you as somebody who is involved in systemizing sales and marketing?
Well, it's quite simple, Henning. So, what is that person doing, right, in any given workday? How are they making the most use of their time? And I think we really kind of covered, a few of these items already, but are they randomly just kind of going, through lists that they have, whether they're creating those lists themselves or downloading it from a database and just, with no rhyme or reason, just calling on people? And then, how are they following up with those people, right? How are they remembering to follow up? If we were on a sales call today and you said, Jason, that sounds great, but call me back in 6 months. It's just not a good time right now. Is the salesperson going to remember to call back in 6 months? Are they documenting that anywhere? I think there's, certainly a handful of sales people and organizations that look for the easy, wins, right? What they can close right now, and the things that take a little bit more time, they put to the back burner, and they often forget about those things. So I think productivity is really a full cycle process. Is starting at the beginning and how to be productive to zone in on the deals that are likely to close or can close quickly, but not to forget about the ones that might take a little bit longer to close. And especially if you already have a 3, 6 month, 12-month, longer sales cycle, well, you need to have the really, really, disciplined approach to how you're going to follow up with that person through that whole process and give them the information they need. So I think productivity is, something that is often sort of dismissed as, not many people think about it, but once you start optimizing, you realize, oh, wow, we really were not being productive with our time, in our team.
Yeah, absolutely. Then, of course, we talk about sales and marketing because those are our wheelhouses or respective wheelhouses that we're in. But of course, there are other parts of the company that influence the ability of sales and marketing to generate revenue and win customers. What do you think other teams can do to help both sales and marketing to achieve their goals?
Well, it's really talking about, right, the customer experience. So the customer experience happens at all different levels, from customer service to order fulfillment. And at the end of the day, you need to have all those teams working together, and it comes back to efficiency and productivity. So a quick story, an example is that we had one client that would send out physical brochures if somebody requested one. And so they would get the lead from the website, would go in the CRM, but then the salesperson was manually emailing and building a spreadsheet to notify the admin that was actually sending out the physical brochures, which was, unneeded, right? So what we did is we automated that process where as soon as the request came in, the admin who did not have access to CRM was sent an email with a label to say, here's the label to print out, here's who needs a brochure. And then we would tag it in the CRM saying, okay, this person is being sent the brochure. So the salesperson knew it was already taken care of. The admin got what they needed, and it just made the whole process a lot more efficient. And so, we see this from, onboarding. We see it from, repair or sort of customer service type organizations, reorder and support and those sort of things where we can tie all of that together. But again, it comes down to leadership and are the teams siloed or are they working together in a collaborative way? And that's really what it comes down to, Henning, is, how well is the team gelling and working together without technology? Because if they're not working together at all, that's the first thing, right? And that's where someone needs to come in and help fix that. But once that's fixed, then we could layer in the technology to help build a more sustainable process.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I think of what can improve, what other teams can do to improve sales productivity, there are plenty of things that come to mind, and they all can be subsumized in if something else is broken and the customer notices it, they always come back to sales and waste their time. If invoicing is done incorrectly, if collection is off, if manufacturing is delayed, if the product is not up to what was committed, all of these things come back to a salesperson, and the salesperson has to engage with the customer on it without generating new sales. So it, in fact, keeps them away from generating new revenue. So everything needs to work together in every, and that is, to your point, leadership. It starts at the very top, and the very top has a responsibility to make sure that that each of the pieces of the puzzle work well and work well together.
Agreed.
Jason, should we wrap it up? Are we?
I think we should. I think we really gave everybody a lot of information to absorb. And what would be the best way, Henning, if somebody wanted to contact you to learn more about you and what you have to offer, and just had questions? What would be the best way for them to do that?
Well, the best way is to go to our website, Vendux, vendux.org, and has all our contact details there, and as well as my personal contact details. So I look forward to having conversations about sales and sales productivity and sales leadership.
That's terrific. Yeah, and the same for me at Cultivize, cultivize.com. Lots of resources there, great downloads and other information to dive deeper into the conversation we had today. And so, Henning, I really thank you for your time. It's always a pleasure speaking with you, and I'm excited that we're able to share the conversations we always have with the rest of the world, so they can kind of hear about the things we talk about and hopefully get some insights and put that into action for their business.
Thank you, Jason.
Until next time, right? We'll do this again.
We will do this again. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.